Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's MMA Cycles Market Update. This is Gianni DePocha, your host, and I'm joined by a very special guest, Ulric Aspegren. He's back to talk with us about currencies. Ulric, how are you today?
Excellent. Nice to be back. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And I must say that the timing of this conversation we're about to have is very auspicious, to say the least, especially when we look at the geocosmics that we're going into next week. We're going to have Venus form a conjunction with Neptune on the 15th of February. And the day before, we have very important inflation CPI numbers. So the consensus as of late in the US is that inflation has been defeated. But with Venus, we look for currencies to be involved. And with Neptune, we would look for crude oil to be involved in some sort of important price action, which could lead to a pretty significant reversal. And in fact, the reversals may have already happened, and we'll discuss that in just a moment. And then the next day, we have a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But before we do, I do want to review some charts and what's happened in markets this week. Stocks sold off for the most part. As of right now, we're trading near the lows of the week in the Dow Jones. So a little bit of defensive posturing we've talked about in our reports, the lateness of a couple cycles, and we're starting to see those weigh on the indices, especially looking at the NASDAQ coming down here again on Friday and trading near the lows of the week. So Ulric, any takes on what's going on in the US equity markets or even anywhere abroad? Anything that you're looking at right now?
Well, I'm tracking the FTSE in the UK, and it had a great run. And to me, it is on track. We had like a 3-year low that was made, and from there on, it's been moving up and taking on new highs. And so, for the moment, looking at the market cycle, I'm still keen that it's going to keep moving up.
You know, that's very important. You pointed out that the FTSE made a new all-time high, and that type of leadership, we've seen a lot of international markets outperforming the US, which has been a pretty big change in the trend of recent years, where we've seen US markets outperform the most. So that's a big trend that could potentially continue, but that also ties into our currency discussion, which we're going to have in just a moment. I want to take a look at the 10-year interest rate. We're seeing rates creep up here into the end of the week. And, the signatures that we have next week between Venus and Neptune and the Sun and Saturn, I think are bound to have a big impact on interest rate markets. And it looks like rates are starting to tick back higher after correcting for a few months there. So, this is very important when it comes to currencies. And again, that inflation data that we're going to have next week is likely to lead to some big moves in interest rate markets. So, Ulric, as a currency analyst, any takes on what's going on in interest rate or bond markets around the world?
Well, the way I track it is with the geocosmics. Really, we know that the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, and since then it should be moving up. So I'm seeing higher interest rates. It's very possible that we could get, if we look at the previous cycle, we got it went up and then it came back down and everybody was happy, and it seemed like we're beating it, but then it started to really move up. So that's my outlook right now.
Yeah, I tend to be in the same camp as you. So let's talk about crude oil. I'm going to use the ETF USO as a proxy. This is an ETF that we cover in the MMA monthly ETF report. And, we're seeing crude oil trading near the highs of the week here on Friday, going into that Venus conjunction with Neptune. This is pretty significant. And if we see crude oil start to creep back higher, I think it's going to lead to a reignition in inflation expectations, which is going to inevitably lead to some big moves in currency markets. So I'm building the plot here for our discussion on currencies. So Ulric, any take on what's happening in the energy or other commodity markets around the world?
Well, the crude oil, I believe we have made we've made a 50-month cycle low that took place. You can see the lowest point there, and therefore, I've been quite, let's say, seeing that we should get a rally out of it.
Yeah.
Well, that rally it's coming now. It's a little bit late. It's part of a bigger cycle, which is the 3.6-year cycle. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And we are coming to the last 15-month cycle for this. So we could get a rally that goes up, but I don't see it taking out the previous high at this moment. Yeah, that's at least because, you know, we're running out of time a little bit.
Well, you know what's interesting about oil, and something that we've discussed in these weekly videos, is, you know, we're about a month away from Saturn ingressing into Pisces. And today I actually saw a news headline that Russia, which represents 10% of the global energy production, is set to cut their oil production by 500,000 barrels per day. So we know that Saturn has a tendency to either depress prices by lowering demand, or lead to shortages in supply, which can mean higher prices. So I think that's something we need to keep an eye on with respect to energy. And especially, you know, with Jupiter still in Aries, you know, that's a very tense geopolitical transit and, you know, obviously there's no shortage of geopolitical tensions now, but I'm especially interested, as, you know, we talk about commodities here, on how they will perform once Jupiter goes into Taurus in May. So, you know, you're talking about the possibility of oil making, you know, at least having a little bit of a rally here. I tend to agree with you.
Correct. Good. Well, it very much depends also what the dollar is going to do. So maybe we should move into the US dollar index.
Yeah, let's do that. Before we do, I just want to touch on Bitcoin real quick. You know, it is its own currency, if you will, of the sort. We're correcting a little bit here. We are in a time band where a reversal could occur, especially with Venus. You know, it's been shown, according to our studies, that Venus has a tremendous impact on the cryptocurrency market. So, you know, look for a reversal of some sort in the next week or two here in the Bitcoin market. So that's all I have to say about that. Let's go ahead and pull up the dollar index. This is as of Thursday's close. The dollar's up a little bit here today on Friday. So, Ulric, how are you seeing the U.S. dollar? And then we can take it into the euro as well.
Yeah. Well, the key is to understand the larger cycles. And we got a big low in January 2021 at around $89. And we are now 25 months from that low. So if you look at the chart, you just see you know, it just moves up very dramatically, and there's no other highs or lows really important except the one that was made now in September of last year, around just shy of $115, and hence I believe that the intermediate term cycle is a 20-month cycle. And in fact, it has a 5 months orb. So we are just at the end of this cycle. And therefore, I think if it didn't happen on February 2nd there at around $101, if that low did not happen, which could have been the 20-month cycle low, then, you know, it's very close. But right now, my bias is that the low is in, and that we could get a good rally in the dollar due to the cycles.
Well, you know, that's very interesting. You pointed out, you know, we're talking about the potential for, you know, a rally in commodities here too, just moments ago. And, you know, Ulric, I know you've been trading for a long time. It was the case for a long time that when the dollar was bullish, it was bearish for commodities. But if interest rates start to come back up due to a commodity rally, that could actually lead to a rally in the dollar, because you're going to have, you know, international capital looking to buy the higher yielding dollars compared to the euro, compared to the Japanese yen. So we've kind of had the script flip, in the sense that inflation or a commodity rally could actually end up being bullish for the dollar. So that's how I see the macro, and it's interesting that it lines up with your cycle analysis too.
I tend to be very focused on the market cycles,
yeah,
and try to, you know, figure out what is it going on with the historical data. And if you look at it, it has retraced now around 55%, and that's bullish. It has fallen around 12% from that September high. And if you look at a 20-month cycle, it can still be bullish. Even it could fall as low as 16%.
Oh, wow.
So let's, if you look at it, it is in a bullish environment.
Oh yeah.
And the only caveat here is that it had such a dramatic rise, so that this 20 months intermediate term cycle is the sub cycle of the 3.4-year cycle. Now you need 2 20-month cycles to make up the 3.4-year cycle. So if we now got one of those 20-month cycles, we should get another one to complete that 3.4-year cycle. However, the 3.4-year cycle crest has a maximum, if we use 80% of the data, it has $117. That's the top. And we came up to, close to 115.
Yeah.
So in my view, when I look at that, I'm saying, well, that could have already, the top could already be in. It doesn't mean we should not get a good rally now, but we could get up to come to a double top, or just take it out, come up to that. There's a big channel, long-term channel, and it could just take out that high or be a little bit, below it. That's right, what I'm looking at now. And in terms of timing, it should be in by September of this year, the 3.4-year cycle crest. So that's a little bit now. Okay, this analysis, or this, let's say, forecast hinges on that the greater cycle was actually made in January of 2021.
Yeah.
However, that was a short cycle. That was only 12.8 years. So we are now about 14.2 years into the cycle. So there's still time for the cycle, meaning that this September 28, 2022 top could have been the greater cycle top. And if that is, we are on the other way, we are coming down quite hard. I noted that it should then be in by April of next year, and we could get a drop of 41 to 52%. Now, that's not my bias, but it's, we can't take it off the table just yet.
Well, another thing that lines up interesting with your cycle timing, Ulric, and you and I discussed this last year when you joined us. A lot of financial astrologers have pointed out to Uranus transiting through Taurus as being responsible for the cryptocurrency boom, but it was actually during a discussion that you and I had where we pointed out that the US dollar has engaged in a tremendous bull market since around the time that Uranus ingressed into Taurus definitively in 2018. So, we usually see busts. We see a boom bust cycle whenever Uranus is going through a sign, and when Uranus gets to the last decan, the last 10 degrees of the sign, is when we start to see the bust. And as you talk about the beginning of next year, that's around the time where Uranus definitively ingresses into the final decan of Taurus. So I think that's fascinating too.
Yeah, definitely. It's not off the table. Yeah.
Let's talk about the euro now, Ulric. So obviously the euro is the greatest weighted currency within the dollar index. So how are you seeing the euro? I would assume it's similar to your overall outlook on the dollar.
Well, it's pretty much the opposite, but because it represents around 50 or close to 60% of the value of the basket in the dollar of those currencies. Yeah. Well, if you look at it, I believe we had a greater cycle low in 2017, in January 2017. It was made after 16 years from the 2001 low. So that seems to me to be quite well cemented. And if that's correct, then actually the prices have broken below this low, meaning that the lowest price of that greater cycle should be at its very end. Mm-hmm. Now we're 6 years into the cycle and change, meaning that there's about 10 years to go for the euro to just, keep falling down or just break or disappear. I don't know exactly, but 10 years is a long time. A lot of things can happen.
Yeah.
Now, so that is the first important thing to know. Now, the second part is that we got in March 2020 a big low, and that happened after 38 months. So it was either a short 4-year cycle or a long 32-month cycle. I tend to go with the 4-year cycle because that's what the euro prefers to divide into. Now, if that's correct, then the low that we just had in September 28th here at $0.95 last year, that low happened after 30 months. So the 24-month cycle, which breaks the 4-year into two, started in, I believe, in March 2020 and has now done 30 months, meaning the orb is a 6 months orb, so it could still possibly be a 24-month cycle that happened then in September. Yeah. So the rally, if this is correct, should be a bearish rally only in a 24-month cycle, and that should end by March this year. So and we have come up to the price targets, which I had maximum around 112, where we came up to 110.33 on February 2nd, and that's very possible. That was the top that we're looking for. There's a caveat, because if the 32 months is the active cycle, then it could keep going much longer during the year until almost the end of the year. So yeah. I'm a little bit concerned about that if the reversal has happened now, and that it did not happen in a quite active, let's say, geocosmic time. Now we're going to have March, that's going to be very important, and also May. So yeah, that's the I'm looking at. I almost remember Ray Merriman saying that, you know, the times he have gone with the market cycles and not respected the geocosmics, it hasn't worked out, you know, as well as he wished. So we got to be a bit careful. But for me, time-wise, it looks very much that the reversal could be in.
Well, you know, you keep talking about May, and you know, the big signature happening around that time is, you know, we have Jupiter going into Taurus, and the day it ingresses into Taurus forms a square aspect to Pluto. So Taurus rules currencies, Jupiter rules exaggeration and you know, big events. Pluto rules debts, central banking. It's in the sign of Aquarius too. So there could be a currency shock to the system around that time. We can't rule that out.
That's right. It's even worse though, because Mars is involved in that.
Yes, T-square.
Yeah. So there could be, you know, war. The war problems could be also involved. So of course, yeah, we should be on an alert, especially during May. I think May is a bigger event than March, although March is quite important what happens, but it might be more long-term changing of the investors' way of seeing the outlook. It maybe takes a little bit more time, but definitely May could be a big, well, actually, after that, there's not that much happening during the whole year. So, yeah. I mean,
all the fireworks in the first half of this year. Well, Ulric, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday to have this discussion with me. It's a pleasure as always. Everyone, if you like the analysis that Ulric just shared with us, he was one of the original students of the Merriman Market Timing Academy from back in 2012, 2013. So he's been a practitioner and basically a master of this material for over a decade. And the MMTA course, we're launching it again, starting it in March, on March 18th. So if you want to learn what Ulric just explained, that is the place to come find it. We also have the monthly cycles report set to be published this upcoming week on Monday and Tuesday. Ulric is a contributor to that as well. So, you know, this is real world analysis and real world application of what's going on in markets. So, Ulric, before I close us out, any final words?
Well, my only final is that time is more important than price, and that's the way I look at things. I think this system is wonderful. It gives you a time map, and you know, like no other system.
Indeed. Ulric, aside from your work at MMA, where can people find you?
They can find me. I work as a financial consultant. I'm based in Switzerland, close to Geneva. They can find me at contact@aspegren-analysis.com.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Ulric, and we'll have you back again in the future. And everyone, check us out at www.mmacycles.com. Thank you, and have a great weekend.